start with the I'll start with the presentation then. So thank you all for joining us. This is fantastic to see all your faces, well, some of your faces, and see how many people you are and where you're all from. Yeah, I'm speaking from Spain. Toyin's in USA, and this is an event of the first virtual IGRS symposium. It's Thursday, 30th of July, 2020, and we're about to participate in Playing Chamber Music for a Living, presented by Toyin Spellman-Diaz, oboist of Imani Winds. I'm Sarah Roper, first Vice President of IDRS, and I'll be moderating this event. So if anybody's got any questions that they want to write down in there's a little sign at the bottom of the screen. I suppose it'd be in the chat, actually, if it's not in the question Q&A.
Yeah, this one's a little bit different, Sarah. Today, the chat is open for everyone, so they can feel free to use the...
Okay, great. Well, we'll be we'll just see how it goes. We'll go with the flow, basically. And well, without further delay, I'll pass you on to Toyin Spellman-Diaz. Thank you.
Thank you. This is such a treat for me to talk to double reed players. I know it's a crazy world out there right now, but it's fun to talk about the past and the present and the future in terms of how chamber music can be and what it has been and what it can be. That's so exciting, and so I think this time we're living in is really helpful for that kind of thing. And I'm going to just use my story as kind of a starting point for what things were and how they could be as positive and wonderful as possible going forward. Because I truly think that chamber music right now, since we're all kind of stuck at home and we don't have to make so many reads, who's with me? I think I think it's a moment for reflection for all of you. Yeah, thanks, Eric. Yeah, Jordan. Yeah, I'm feeling you. So I think it's a time of reflection for us on how we can be better citizens of this, of the double reed world for sure, but just the music world in general. So let's start. My story is, what it is. I lived my life as a classical musician, and I want to really talk right now not just about my life, but lead you guys through a series of visualizations. And what I mean by that, so I want you to have some paper or like a device or something that you can write on ready. So have that ready for this time. I want us to kind of keep our minds open and imagine together. I'm going to talk about what has made me successful, but I will pause in some points in my story and give you prompts, audio prompts on how to help you imagine your own version of these things that I'm talking about. I'm talking a lot about what it will be, but I just want to have you ready for what's about to happen, because I don't like just talking all the time. I like to have conversations. I think that's more helpful for everybody. So let's start with our first visualization. And for this, you're not going to need your paper and pen. I'm just going to give you a series of images, and I want you to form in your head as full an image as possible, a detailed portrait of this as we go along. So I hope you're ready now. Take your time in between each visualization, and here we go. I want you to picture in your mind, you don't have to write this down yet, picture in your mind a musician. Now, do you have that image in your mind? If so, let's move on. An orchestral musician. Picture an orchestral classical musician. Picture an African American classical musician. Picture an African American woman classical musician. Picture a young African American woman classical musician. Picture a young lesbian African American woman classical musician. Picture a young lesbian African American woman classical musician flutist in your head. Now, obviously that's not me, because it stopped being even close to me when we started saying young. When the word was introduced, it's not about me anymore. But I want you to take this moment to think about how your person that you were coming up with in your head and her surroundings and who she was changed, and your neurons had to reconnect as the original person you had in your head became more defined. And this changing, or this reconnect of neurons, I want you to realize that all people who have different classical musicians are many different things. African American classical musicians are many, many different things. And so when you're getting farther and farther into who a person is, it doesn't have to be just African American. It could be anybody. As you're getting farther, wherever you're from, whatever country you're from, as you get farther into this, though, when you're talking about people who have been traditionally marginalized, all these images that come to your head first of what a classical musician is, all these things are built into the psyche of the person. And all of the ways that you might have not seen them at first, not your fault because you didn't know who they were yet, but all of these things are built into their identity. And every layer of things, whether you're a woman classical musician, a lesbian classical musician, whatever it is, they all have their own different challenges that have to be faced. So let's keep that kind of switching of neurons that just happened for us in mind as we're talking about this next little bit of my life. Okay, and as we go along, just keep that in mind, all right? So, as a young person, I was really lucky that my father was a member of, or was a very high up person in the National Endowment for the Arts, which for you guys who aren't in the United States is the government funding agency of the United States for the arts. And so he got lots of free tickets to things. So I got to see opera when I was very young, and ballet when I was very, very young. Plus, I grew up in Washington, D.C., which is an amazing place for free arts organizations, beyond what I was lucky enough to get as the father of my daughter of my father. So I was going to museums every weekend and seeing all sorts of art and culture and events from a very early age. And so my parents moved to this, it was actually a convent in DC, and they converted it into a house. And they had a chapel in that house, and they also had a piano for hymns and stuff. So I used to bang on the piano all the time, and so they finally got me piano lessons. And my teacher recognized right away that I had a decent ear, right? So she gave me, she taught me theory and was very helpful in developing me at the beginning. I stayed with that piano teacher through high school. But then I started taking flute in elementary school. I was lucky enough to go to a public elementary school that had all the instruments. Well, they didn't have oboe. You guys know what that's like. They didn't have oboe, but I was lucky enough to go to a place where I was able to play flute. And my parents found me a teacher who was incredibly helpful to me and really started to define who I am as a player even now. Some of the things that this teacher taught me right away were really helpful. So we're going to pause here and do a visualization here. Now, from what I've told you so far about my life, but let's take me out of it for a second, or the Toyin out of it, and just talk about who you think I am. What do you think this teacher did that was really helpful for me? What would a private teacher of a young, believe it or not, I was extremely shy, black girl of age 10 or 13 with a good ear, what would they do? So let's start writing down some ideas, if you can, of what would a teacher of a private teacher, this sacred relationship that we're all beneficiaries of, what would they do to help me? Who would they be? What would they look like? What kind of pedagogical tools would they use? What kind of music would they teach me? If you were the teacher of somebody like me, what would you do to make me feel seen and appreciated? So, does anybody have any kind of ideas of what they might do to do things? And could you, if you could, write things in the chat over here? Thank you, Catherine, for saying I'm young. Appreciate that. Yes. I love the idea of asking the student what they listen to, because I think sometimes we forget how much we as teachers have a two-way street. Like, you learn a lot from your students sometimes. And if you're not a non-black teacher teaching a person of color, chances are you could learn a whole lot from that student. So I love that idea. Positive reinforcement. Yeah, I did. I still remember the first piece I learned. Grace said, learning by ear. I still remember the first thing. I was a really good music reader, but the first thing that my teacher had me do was learn something by ear, and I still remember it. So yeah, for sure. I also have tremendous long-term memory and a horrible short-term memory. Yes, yes, Sarah. Yes, understood. Unspoken cultural experiences. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, my teacher, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my teacher, and maybe it'll spark some other ideas before we move on. His name was, he called himself Brother Ah, my teacher, my flute teacher, but his real name was Robert Northern. Robert Northern was actually a French horn player. He went through all the conservatories, and he was actually the first African American to play with the Met. And so his experiences there, though, were so racist and so horrible that he kind of quit playing classical French horn. He also got to play with like the Gil Evans band and do all sorts of great stuff like that. That's when he came up in the 70s and late 60s. But he quit all that, changed his frickin' name to Brother Ah, got a ton of like world music instruments. Like, he had all sorts of instruments all over his house from around the world. So he taught me how to play African flute, Indian flute, the nose flute. I forget which culture you play. So he taught me how to do all that stuff. Pan flute. I was doing all that stuff at 10, 11, 12, 13. And he taught me jazz songs, and he taught me classical stuff. And so that's what he was kind of doing for that. Hey, by the way, I'm so excited to tell you this. These things right here, these lips, larger lips, that some Asian students have, and some African American and African-based students have, these should not be put in all the way when you're playing. I think this would apply for bassoon as well. I'll speak for my bassoon friends. These are, when you're teaching people with larger lips, you use these as a tool for different types of timbres. This is something else he taught me that later oboe teachers didn't know what to do with, really. I've eventually figured it out what embouchure I should have. But I think a lot of people who teach people with larger lips teach them to put them all in. I think that's a mistake because these are an opportunity for a lot of different timbre colors. So think about that when you're teaching your students. Okay, so there we are. He was a kind of ideal teacher for me. Now, this doesn't only apply to African American, like I said. If you have a student of a different race than what you are, all of what you're saying is perfectly right. Like he showed me clips um, of different African American uh, flute players when I studied with him. You know, so I didn't feel like I was alone in the world. So that was also something that he did that was super helpful. And you know what? He let me play on some of his recordings, even though I sucked. It was great. It was great. So he made me feel like I was a valuable musician. So anyway, from there, let's move on. I went on to the DC Youth Orchestra program, which at the time was very unique in the country because at the time it was about 60 to 70% Black and Latino. And that was very rare in the 80s. Nowadays, we have some El Sistema programs around the country, of the US at least, and I think some in Europe too, that are wonderful. And but at the time, there's nothing like it. So in the DC Youth Orchestra, this was helpful to me for many reasons. We did play music by composers of color sometimes, as well as a whole lot of Beethoven. And we worked our way through the Mozart piano concertos. We played a lot of new music in our orchestra. And because we're in DC, people like to have us come and play for state events, like at an embassy or stuff like that. So I felt like our music was important to the community that we lived in. I also spent some time at this organization in DC called the Levine School, which is blown up. It's a private music organization that they had some good connections. So I played for the president at the time at least twice, and the vice president a few times too, of the United States within my orchestra at Levine School. And then I split my time going to a Catholic all-girls school high school with no music program, pretty much, and the Duke Ellington School for the Arts, a very famous public high school in DC. And it was different. Each of these three organizations did entirely different things. DC Youth Orchestra went to the former Soviet Union and South Korea as in tours. The Levine School did these high presidential mucky muck stuff. And Duke Ellington played for everybody. We played in malls. We played for different schools and the school systems in the area. So all of this kind of playing for everybody thing, it just got into that psyche of who I am. So then I went to Oberlin for my undergrad. Oberlin, if people from other countries don't know it has a reputation for being an excellent music school. I had a terrific teacher there, oboe teacher there, and it also is very well known for its social justice initiatives as a college. But let's pause here again at Oberlin, or music school, and let's talk about how a music school, a conservatory, could benefit a young person like me, a young player who can play by ear pretty well, who's got a little bit of jazz training, she really wants to do is win a job in an orchestra. But she also has all of this support that she's had of a black teacher, actually a couple of black teachers. I had a black oboe teacher too at Duke Ellington School. So what would a conservatory do to support somebody like me? Or be inclusive of as many different types of people as possible? Yes. Ability and potential. Two of the most talented pianists at the school when I was there were African American. One could play anything. He was brought up in the gospel church, black gospel church, so he could play anything. He could play classical stuff, but he didn't finish his degree because he didn't feel like his potential was reached. He could play things beyond just the Brahms and Beethoven that he was assigned in his lessons, and so he quit. And now he's doing all sorts of awesome stuff in Japan and the United States. Catherine says something so super important. In terms of training kids of any race to win orchestral jobs, it's all about fitting in exactly into a little box. Well, Catherine, I'm hoping through this talk we're about to have that we can talk about how orchestras can be more than what they are now. You're right, that's what it takes right now. But how can we be more later? Amen to the diverse group of teachers. Have undergrad teach lessons to beginning players for free. Yeah. You know, as a person of color in a conservatory, a double reed player in an orchestra, there was always about, in the wind section, there were maybe 3 out of the 6. I'm trying to think of how large the wind students class are. I would say it was a very small percentage of people of color in there, Black and Latino, and so and we saw there were no wind teachers of color. Even though Oberlin has a tremendous reputation, and I love Oberlin and I've got a great education there, the way that I got through it really well was back in the 90s. We talked a lot about not seeing color and being colorblind, and I was kind of in that. I was just thinking about playing Le Tombeau and Beethoven 3. I wasn't really thinking about, you know, feeling included. But I know a lot of people dropped out who did not feel included. So if you build a conservatory where people feel like they are welcome, whatever they look like, then they feel welcome, they will stay. Opportunities. I know at some music schools, they don't want you to take gigs or to play outside of your conservatory. It's not about building community with the outside world, but there are some programs who are doing really well with that. The University of Maryland has a great program where they go out a lot into the local school system. Who else has a really good version of it? Eastman has a great program where they have a lot of education work that the students do with people outside. So it's multi-generational. So yeah, I like that idea. Great. Okay, so let me tell you what Oberlin was like when I joined in 1990. They had 2 years ago, maybe 3, started a jazz major, which was fairly new, like in school, in conservatories, and they're everywhere now. But the vast majority of the African American musicians were, and Latino musicians were jazz majors or voice majors. In the orchestra, we played almost no repertoire by musicians of color. In fact, I remember talking to our orchestra director at the time. We students had found a couple of pieces that we wanted to play, or thought were really good pieces by composers of color, and we brought them to the conductor, and they said, nope, they're not good enough for everybody to play. And so that was the kind of thing, even at Oberlin, which is a school that was known for social justice, that was not seen. Let's not even talk about music theory. Sarah and I were talking about that earlier, and talk about music theory and music history and how it's not very inclusive of other cultures. The strongest advocates for change at Oberlin were the students. So we did, that's because they did build outside of the conservatory these programs called EXCO, which was, students could run their own classes. So that was super helpful for us. Um, let's see, and I had a very good teacher who was very much behind me the whole way, so I was lucky in that case. But not everybody who goes through a school has teachers who accept women students as well as he did, or who accept people who are a little different from the cis male, that white male that usually wins jobs in orchestras up until then, especially. So anyway, Oberlin, that's Oberlin. Went on to Manhattan School. It's great. It was kind of a meritocracy program there. Like, as long as you're playing well, you can do well in the orchestra. Um, I know a lot of people who dropped out who were having troubles outside of the school because they didn't have a lot of money. And schools were just starting to get really expensive then. And so, here in the States at least, I'm very envious of you guys in Europe. Um, so people, it was definitely, what would you call it, an on the job. I'm thinking DeVry College. You guys outside of the United States don't know what DeVry is, but it's like a technical institution where it's actually a mechanic school where you learn to fix cars and engineering. So Manhattan School is very much like that. We learned only about playing music. We didn't take English. We didn't take history. So, but anyway, that's the kind of situation it was, and I was full on, head on, orchestral, big time, ready, out there. My teacher was great. He let me play in the New York Phil. I graduated from there, went out to play in Chicago Civic Orchestra, and subbed with the Chicago Symphony while I was out there. All awesome. Taking auditions, getting to the finals of almost everyone, and I remember I got to the Oregon Symphony audition, and I was in the finals of that one, and I was excited about that orchestra because they had a black conductor at the time, and Portland rocks. It's a great town. So I was ready to win this job, guys. Somebody else got it. But I was walking out in the finals, and I had this moment where I was like, wait a second. This is not a surprise to you now because I've told you my story. Wait a second. I don't want to be an orchestral musician. I don't want to be stuck in an orchestra where there are only a few people who look like me, just this one guy, and who knows how long he'll be here. And I'm not in control of the music that I play. And I'm not even in control about how the business works. Like, none of this is under my control. And I don't want that kind of life. So I was stuck there as umpteen million years of orchestral training. I'm like, what the heck am I going to do with myself? What the heck am I going to do? So fortunately for me, I went back to New York, and Imani Winds had already started my wind quintet that I've been playing with for 23 years. We at that point we were started by our flutist, who was also a composer. Her name is Valerie Coleman. She's kind of blowing up right now. The Philadelphia Orchestra has been commissioning her a lot, and she has a lot of different orchestral commissions now. But back then, she was an African-American flutist who just finished the Mannes School of Music, or was in the Mannes School of Music. And she wanted to start a quintet made up of musicians of color. So she, with that kind of parameter, there weren't all that many people that she could ask at Mannes. So she was forced to go outside of her conservatory and ask people from different conservatories if they would join. And I was lucky enough to be the person she chose to be the oboist of that group. But at the time, like when we started in '97, like I said, I was gung-ho La Scala, you know? I was desperately trying to learn how to circular breathe, which I still can't do. But, you know, I know, right? It's hard. So I didn't pay much attention to it. I just put it to the side. Oberlin was really great for chamber music. Manhattan School, it was kind of secondary, if not tertiary in importance. So that was not what I was going to do. I was going to go off and win a job. But I did it because I like the fact that it was all made up of musicians of color. Imani, by the way, means faith in Swahili. It's one of the principles of Kwanzaa, the African American started holiday that's now for everybody. In that holiday, you celebrate different principles on 7 different days. The principles being unity, purpose, creativity, self-determination, some other stuff. So anyway, so she had the faith to call us all up out of the blue. There was no email yet. And make us, convinced us to join this quintet. So what we did at first was we played a lot of children's concerts. Our first concert was at the Y and by Lincoln Center, if you know it, the YMCA. She was a sub for this early music, like young people's music guru named Lori Berkner. She's like huge. If you have any kids in your life, you probably know who Lori Berkner is. So she was like the sub for her. So we went and played a concert there. We played. We put on our own concert series at a church, and I think maybe 10, 12 people came, maybe. So that's the kind of stuff we were doing when I left and went to Chicago. Like we came back. I came back and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And I was playing with Imani Winds, and I decided, you know what, this is a pretty cool organization. I don't know if I'm going to ever make money at it, but I'm going to stick with this. And so one by one, all the members of Imani Winds decided that we thought it was important enough, like the things we were doing, like playing for young people, playing music by different types of composers, including women and musicians of color or composers of color, playing for all ages, all races. And it seemed like a great idea. So we all started committing more and more time to it. And then we started doing competitions. So there are some U.S.-based competitions. We were too old for the European ones, but we did the Fish-Off competition, the Concert Artists Guild competition, and the Coleman competition, and we won a couple of them. But even the ones we didn't win liked us and saw some potential in us. The most important of those competitions that took an interest in us was called Concert Artists Guild. And what they do is they take young musicians on from their competition and they give them management. So even though we didn't win that competition, they took us in and made us their educational residency ensemble. And what that meant was we would go to a place like South Bend, Indiana, and we'd play for pre-Kers. We would go to libraries. We would go and play at a prison, and then we would do a main stage concert. So at this point, we were really starting to make some money at this. So let's pause again. We haven't paused in a while. So let's pause again and think of how an ensemble, let's take race out of it for a second, right? How would an ensemble at this point who's starting to do competitions, starting to, make money at this so they have the time to devote themselves to this ensemble, how would they make their ensemble be a 21st century inclusive, innovative group? What would you do if you were a part of this new ensemble? It doesn't have to be young, I guess. It could be just any new or budding ensemble. What would you do to make it be a place where your audience felt like they were important to you and that you wanted to have in your audience people from different backgrounds? Economic, social, racial, sexual orientation. How would you build your repertoire? I will answer that. Can I get this survival question later? Remind me to come back to you, Gina. Sorry, I should have gotten my glasses. Need to change the world include to belong gospel music, jazz music, Eastern music, etc. Belong in an excellent music education. I think that was from before, but that's a really great point. Right, new original music, host events at non-concert venues. Yep, for sure. I feel like a lot of times we don't like to play at, you know, it's hard when you're playing at like Starbucks. You know, we've done those kinds of concerts. In fact, one really successful concert we did outside of the concert stage was at Princeton. They had a coffee shop there, and no, I'm sorry, not Princeton, other coast, Stanford. It was at Stanford. They had a really cute coffee shop there, and we went in and we played for the students in there and talked to them and sat next to them and drank coffee with them. And we got a bunch of those students to come to our main stage Stanford concert afterwards. So yeah, I love the idea of doing it in non-concert venues. And I think a lot of young musicians are doing that now. Commission works by people you want in the audience. Deep, Catherine. Play music others aren't playing and championing new composers. Yep, absolutely, absolutely. We like to do something. It's not a. There's no scientific word for this, but we call it Monica's mom test. Monica's our bassoonist, and if Monica's mom isn't going to like it, I mean, we do a lot of explaining of music. We play barrio, we play new music that isn't necessarily all tonal, although we do play a lot of new tonalish music too. But if we can't explain it and make it feel relevant to her, then it's probably not going to make it that long in our repertoire. Work with local composers to understand how to play their music. Yeah, when you're playing new music, it's great to workshop it with them with an open heart and mind, because these composers are hopefully will be bringing new sounds into the ensemble. I'll talk more about that in a second. But local, that's really great. If you go somewhere, play music by that guy or woman or person, and then at least the music you're making is of the place you're in. That's pretty deep. Thanks, Christopher. The students have to create their own performance opportunities. Mm-hmm. Calling up a venue and organize a presentation of a performance. Yeah, it's nice to bring the next generation along too with what you're doing. One of the things Imani Wins is doing right now is trying to create a mentorship program where we can take some students to different places and have them work with students who are there, and then also present them in concert too. So hopefully we'll be able to raise money for that. Right now, as we're like you guys, we're trying to find ways to pay the rent too. So it's hard. It's hard out there unless you live in Spain. Am I right, Sarah? Get the audience actively involved in helping to create a piece on the spot. Yes. Suggesting, William, are you a composer? No. But have you done something like that before? No, you haven't? Can William get his thing turned on for a second? His mic?
There we go. I think I'm on now.
Okay. So I want to hear more about that idea, because that sounds fun.
Well, just if you have some ideas suggested by the audience, like a theme or a tune, and maybe you guys all have good ears, I'm sure, could, maybe create some sort of minimalist piece or a short little piece, just something. And the very act of doing some small thing like that would get the audience totally with you and involved.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Okay. Sarah's reminding me that we have to finish soon. Okay.
Sure.
All right. So that's a great idea. We actually sorry, we actually have a piece like that coming up soon. We're doing a piece written by Andy Akiho, and it's made to be played at an immigrant detention center, outside of an immigrant detention center, at a protest. And it's hopefully it will be designed so the audience is involved with the making of the music. So, okay, Sarah, thank you for the thing. I want to get to questions, but I want to talk about what Imani Winds is doing now. So we have commissioned a lot of works. We've done a lot of pieces by composers of color, but not just composers of color. Starting in our 20th year, we started making a big focus on women composers. And also, we are now in our now that we're in our 20s and our ensemble can drink legally, we are we're making sure that the music that we create is relevant to the times we're living in. So there's things like the Andy Akiho piece that I was just telling you about. Another woman is writing us a piece, or finished writing us a piece about her great-grandfather who immigrated from the United States to Panama and then back to the United States. A whole program built around the idea of immigration. We've done a piece celebrating Gustav Holst's The Planets, where at the 100th anniversary of that piece, and we had people from different cultures writing about their different cultures' perspective of the planets. You know, that's the kind of repertoire we're building now, that stories that take this music that we love and make it relevant to the times we're living in. So that's kind of my presentation part of this. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thanks, Annie. How did I survive living in New York City as a grad student? I live in Jersey now, by the way. Go Jersey. I had a day job while I was during the summers. I would work. I went to very short music festivals, and I got a day job, and I was a temp at different things around the city. Valerie, our flutist, she got a security job. She was a nighttime security guard, and in a very resonant space. So she practiced her long tones at night in that resonant space. So that's how she made her money at the beginning. So we just found ways of making it work. Can a performance program include both the less known or more unique, as has been discussed with the classics or standards? So Michael, let me see, where are you? Can you show yourself? Who's watched Frozen 2? Show yourself. Okay. Okay. I don't see you. But, so what do you mean by that? Michael? I see you. Michael DiPietro? Okay. So, hi there.
Hi.
Michael?
Hello. No, in the same, I guess if it's your own group, you can play whatever you want. But have you found any problem within the same program, performing a more unique piece, a piece with ethnicity or whatever that matches the players, along with something that's standard, that any quintet or whatever would?
Well, I'd say we found no problem with it. In fact, that's probably why we're as successful as we are. You might not know this, but Imani Winds is a full-time woodwind quintet. We've been full-time longer than any ever wind quintet. And we play more concerts than anyone's. And I think part of the reason that we've done that is because we'll play everything for everybody. That's how we've made that thing. And I don't think that has to be just for us. Like, I think that could be any chamber music group. I think, honestly, orchestras would do better if they would just follow that simple thing. And I think we could all follow the adage of how do we change how do we change this world into being more inclusive. And if we all followed the simple adage of money and time, say it solves a lot of stuff. Like, if we give free lessons to people who don't have a lot of money, who might have a lot of potential, and if we put the time in ourselves to learn how to teach these folks, and and the time for them, or the time to learn something new. I feel like we instrumentalists we're not like voice people who continue to study forever. I think there's a lot we can learn as adults, as not young Catherine people. There's still lots we can learn, and a lot of that can start from the younger people and what they're into, who haven't been put into that box yet, that makes what the contemporary orchestras need us to do. I think orchestras and we as individuals, large ensembles, small ensembles, individuals can all learn from this kind of model of playing anything for everyone and putting in the money and putting in the time to get to know people and listen and not be saviors. Just come in knowing that we have so much to learn. And I think it'll make us all happier and better musicians. How's it been adjusting to taking on new personnel? Okay, we got 2 minutes, so I'll be quick. It's been great. They've Mark Dover, our clarinetist, is a ridiculous classical clarinetist and a fantastic jazz musician as well. So he's brought all sorts of great stuff into it. Having Valerie leave was a big blow. She was our founder, our flutist. But Brandon is such a fantastic, beautiful musician, and he's so giving that we pick people who make things better, who we can stand being in a minivan with, traveling 5 hours, and being on planes with. So being in charge of your life is pretty cool. Hopefully we choose well. What are the most important elements? Okay, to moving to digital. We have a chamber music festival, by the way, that's taking place August 10th through 12th. I'm writing the link here. It's open to everybody. I'll use this as an example of what we're trying to do, because a lot of what we do now is work with young people. So we're trying to figure out what people need now. So we're having a seminar at our festival on how to build a good home teaching recording studio. For wind players in particular, we're having young composers come in and talk about their careers and how they've made things work and how they've worked with ensembles or individual musicians and what they've learned. We're having a rhythm seminar or an ear training seminar based not necessarily within the classical canon. It's going to be taught by a percussionist who plays a lot of African-based music and who also went to Juilliard, so he's fully aware of, I'll say we're out of time, classical contemporary stuff. So anyway, we're building stuff that is, we're talking, like I said, it's not necessarily so much about performing right now, it's about talking. That's it for now. Thank you guys. This is really fun. Hi, Isaiah. It's great to see people.
Thank you so much, Toyin, and for your time and for showing us how. Bravo for following your passion and doing everything you believe in. It's fantastic to hear you tell us about everything that you've done so far, and we know that you've got many more great things to do with Imani Wind. So we look forward to enjoying that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to see you all.
Great. Thank you. Bye, everybody. See you the next one. Bye. Thank you.